I'm Luella. As I sit in the back of the armored sedan, the cityscape blurs outside the tinted windows. My mind is still reeling from the events that unfolded just an hour ago in my father's office. The conference room, once suffocatingly small, now seems like a distant memory filled with tension and betrayal. The door to the conference room burst open, and 3 federal agents strode in. They were dressed in dark suits, their expressions stern and authoritative. Special Agent Thompson from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network introduced himself and his colleagues, Agents Harris and Green. They needed to speak with me about my company, Digital Shield Payment Solutions. The room fell silent. My sister, Vivian, who had been sitting at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured nails drumming impatiently, went pale. My mother, seated beside her, gasped in surprise, and my father, who had been standing by the window with his arms crossed, took a step forward. Ms. Luella, we've detected multiple unauthorized access attempts to your systems originating from this location, Agent Thompson said, his voice firm. I remained calm, though I had been expecting this. Breaches? I asked, my voice steady. Agent Green explained that someone had been trying to access the federal banking system's integration portal using administrative credentials harvested from my systems. The attempts had begun approximately 48 hours ago, and the IP address was registered to my family's real estate company, Sterling Properties. My father's face paled. What federal banking systems? He stammered. I took a deep breath. Digital Shield Payment Solutions is the primary payment processing infrastructure for the Federal Reserve's real-time payment system. We handle encryption, routing, and security protocols for about 40% of all federal banking transactions in the United States. We also provide security for the Treasury Department's electronic federal tax payment system and are the main contractor for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation's transaction monitoring systems. The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian's mouth dropped open, and my mother looked like she was about to faint. My father took a step back, his eyes wide in disbelief. Digital Shield processes around $400 billion in federal transactions daily, Agent Harris added. These breach attempts were extremely serious. If successful, they could have compromised the entire federal banking infrastructure. Vivian's hands started to shake. But the office. It's so small. You said you were barely covering costs. I explained that the small office was just a public front. Our actual data centers were in secure facilities across 3 states, and the operational costs I was struggling with were just for maintaining the public persona. The late rent payments were because I had been diverting funds to expand our federal contracts. Agent Thompson then turned to Vivian. We need to know who had access to your sister's credentials. I pulled out my laptop and brought up the security logs. The attempts came from this IP address, registered to Sterling Properties, I said, showing the screen to the agents. All eyes turned to Vivian. Her face went from pale to gray. I was just trying to see. Luella said she couldn't share client information, but I thought if I could just look at the systems, I could understand. Agent Green's voice was ice cold. You attempted to hack into federal banking systems. Do you have any idea what you've done? Vivian panicked. I hired a cybersecurity consultant. I just wanted to see what Luella was hiding. I thought if I could prove the company was worthless, she'd sell it to me without a fight. I didn't know it was this. Agent Thompson's expression hardened. Hiring someone to breach a federal contractor's security systems is a federal crime, Miss Vivian. Multiple federal crimes, including computer fraud, attempted theft of government property, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Vivian turned to my father, desperate. Dad, fix this. You know people, you can. I interrupted calmly. The consultant you hired, was it Ryan Thompson? Goes by Cybershadow on certain forums. Vivian's eyes widened. How did you? Because he's an FBI informant, Agent Harris said flatly. He's been working with us for 6 months. The moment you approached him about hacking a federal contractor, he reported it. We've been monitoring this entire operation. My father grabbed the back of a chair for support. I explained to Vivian that the consultant had immediately contacted the authorities and fed her just enough information to make her think she was succeeding, while every action was documented. My mother's voice was shrill. Luella, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them Vivian didn't mean. I shook my head. I can't tell them anything except the truth. Vivian attempted to compromise federal banking infrastructure. The Treasury Department doesn't care about family dynamics. Agent Thompson pulled out handcuffs. Vivian Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit computer fraud and attempted unauthorized access to federal systems. Vivian started to cry, mascara running down her face. Luella, please. Tell them I didn't know. Tell them it was a mistake. We're sisters. I watched as Agent Thompson read her rights. This was the same sister who had spent the last 3 years mocking my business. She had convinced my parents that I was incompetent and had tried to steal my company for a measly $200,000. Agent Green then looked at my father. Mr. Sterling, were you aware of your daughter Vivian's activities? Did you provide funding for this so-called research? My father's silence was answer enough. We'll need to examine Sterling Properties' financial records, Agent Thompson said as he cuffed Vivian. And Mr. Sterling, you should contact an attorney. You may be facing charges as an accessory. My mother started to cry quietly, her worldview shattering in an instant. Luella, why didn't you tell us? I sighed. I tried. 3 years ago, when I started Digital Shield, I explained that I was building federal-grade security infrastructure. You said it sounded boring and asked when I was going to do something important. As the agents led Vivian out of the room, Agent Thompson turned back to my parents. Your daughter is one of the most valuable security contractors in the federal government. The work she does protects the financial infrastructure of the entire country. You should be proud. Then they were gone, taking Vivian with them. The conference room suddenly felt cavernous. My father sank into a chair. $400 billion daily? On average, it fluctuates based on market activity, I confirmed. The federal contract revenue alone must be. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Last year's revenue was $1.2 billion, with a profit margin of about 40% after expenses. This year, we're projected to exceed $1.8 billion, I said quietly. My mother gasped. My father's voice was mechanical. The company valuation. If Vivian had succeeded in buying it for $200,000. The actual valuation is somewhere north of $8 billion, I said. It's hard to price accurately because of the classified nature of the contracts. Most of our value is in intellectual property and federal relationships that can't be easily transferred. I stood up and gathered my things. I need to go. I have a meeting with the Department of Homeland Security in 2 hours about expanding our cryptocurrency monitoring systems. My mother reached out. Luella, wait. We didn't know. You have to understand, we didn't know. I looked at her gently. You didn't ask. For 3 years, you saw what you expected to see, a failed business, a disappointing daughter. You never once asked for details about what I was actually building. My father's voice cracked. We thought we were helping. The buy-out, the consulting position, we thought we were saving you from failure. I shook my head. You thought you were acquiring a failed asset for pennies on the dollar. Vivian knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to steal my company and was willing to break federal law to do it. The signing papers were still on the table. I picked them up and looked at the insulting terms one last time. $200,000 for a company worth $8 billion, for systems that process nearly half of all federal banking transactions, for infrastructure that protects the financial security of millions of Americans. I set the papers down and pulled out my phone. I showed my father the business account balance on my banking app. This is just the operating account for the public-facing side of the business, the account you thought represented my entire company's finances. The balance is $47 million. My mother whimpered. The actual operational accounts are managed through Federal Reserve banking systems. They're not visible on consumer banking apps. That's where the real money is. My father stood up, looking genuinely humble for the first time in my life. We made a terrible mistake. We can fix this. As a family. I interrupted quietly. Vivian is going to federal prison. The minimum sentence for what she did is 5 years, probably longer given the scope and sophistication of the attempt. You'll likely face charges as an accessory if they can prove you funded her consultant. My mother pleaded, but we're family. Surely you can talk to them. Explain that we didn't understand. I shook my head. I can't interfere with a federal investigation. And I won't. Vivian didn't just try to steal from me. She tried to compromise systems that protect the entire U.S. banking infrastructure. That's not a family matter. That's a national security issue. My father's shoulders sagged. What happens now? Now, I go to my meeting with DHS. You call attorneys, very expensive ones. And you start preparing for what comes next, a federal investigation into Sterling Properties, forensic accounting to determine what you knew and when, possible charges, and definitely publicity. I headed toward the door and then paused. Oh, and you should probably prepare for the lawsuits. I'm a federal contractor with security clearance. Vivian's attempt to breach my system has likely violated the terms of my government contracts. I'll need to sue Sterling Properties to demonstrate that I'm taking appropriate action to protect federal interests. It's standard protocol. My mother's face went white. You're going to sue us? I'm going to sue Dad's company, yes. For enabling an attempted breach of federal security systems. My attorneys estimate the damages at around $500 million, though we'll probably settle for much less. My father couldn't even finish his sentence. 500. I said calmly, it's not personal. It's procedure. When a family member of a federal contractor attempts to compromise classified systems, the contractor has to demonstrate absolute commitment to security. That means cutting all ties and pursuing maximum damages. I opened the door and looked back one last time. For what it's worth, I really did want you to be proud of me. I wanted to build something important, something that mattered. I wanted to show you that I could succeed on my own terms in my own field. My mother sobbed. We would have been proud if we'd known. I corrected her. If you'd known I was successful, you'd have been proud. But you were perfectly happy to be disappointed when you thought I was failing. That tells me everything I need to know. My father's voice was barely a whisper. Can you ever forgive us? I considered the question. Maybe eventually, but first, Vivian needs to face the consequences of her actions. You need to understand the magnitude of what almost happened, and I need to focus on my actual work, the work you thought was worthless. My mother said desperately, the gala next weekend. You could come, explain to everyone what really happened. Show them how successful you are. I shook my head. I won't be at the gala. I'll be in Washington briefing members of the Senate Banking Committee on cryptocurrency regulation, but I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about with the Hendersons. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. A text from Agent Thompson, your sister is being processed. We'll need your statement by tomorrow. Also, the director wants to thank you personally for your cooperation with the monitoring operation. I'd known for 3 weeks that Vivian was trying to hack my systems. The FBI had contacted me immediately when Ryan reported her approach. We turned it into a sting operation, documenting every step while she thought she was getting closer to her goal. Another text came through from my actual office, the secure facility where my real team worked. Meeting with DHS confirmed for 2 p.m. The cryptocurrency monitoring expansion looks good for approval. Also, congratulations on whatever just happened. The Treasury Department press release is already making waves. I allowed myself a small smile. By tomorrow, every news outlet in the country would know that the federal government's banking security was protected by Digital Shield payment solutions. My phone would ring constantly with interview requests, contract offers, and probably a few marriage proposals from people who'd never heard of me 24 hours earlier. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, leaving behind the family that had spent 3 years telling me I wasn't good enough, smart enough, successful enough. They'd finally learned the truth, but it was 20 minutes too late and had cost them everything. As the elevator descended, I pulled up my schedule for the week: Senate briefing, new contract negotiations with the Department of Defense, a keynote speech at a cybersecurity conference. And somewhere in there, I'd need to meet with my attorneys about the lawsuit against my father's company. It was going to be a busy week, but running a company that processed $400 billion in federal transactions daily was never boring. The elevator reached the ground floor, and I stepped out into the lobby where my security detail was waiting. Ms. Luella, the car is ready. We should leave now to make your DHS meeting, the lead agent said. Thank you, Jack, I replied. As we walked toward the armored sedan, I caught sight of my reflection in the lobby's glass walls. The same woman who'd been sitting in that conference room an hour ago, being told her business was worthless and her life was disappointing. Except now, everyone knew the truth. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting angry. It's staying quiet, building something extraordinary, and letting the world discover your success at exactly the right moment.